Ladies and gentlemen, it's the internet's favorite movie centric list making podcast, 10 to 1, here coming at you live on a special night. I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined as always by the queen of the lists about movies, Jen.
Well, technically, I'm actually the princess of movies, but oh, okay, that's okay. Eventually, I will be queen, so we'll let it go.
Who's then
Totally
who's
fine.
who's the reigning queen?
I don't think there is actually the reigning queen, because the king is kind of not around. So
Mm. Sounds like one of those really weird royal situations where they're trying to figure out where exactly the crown's supposed to go, but things are
and
just a little
generally, the
mixed up.
Joker has something to do with it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. That's exactly right. See, this is a perfect segue into our list topic for tonight because our list topic for tonight is movies that feature puzzles. And I have to say that the reason that I chose this for this week is because
You wanted me to die.
no, but I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy a little bit of no. Okay. Here this is what I chose this for. So, this week, actually last week, um was the return of a show called a TV show called From. And this TV show called From is basically a series of unconnected events which we know narratively d- construct some kind of puzzle. In a really similar way to the way that Lost was, but maybe better. Maybe better because I think the outcome is going to be better. So it's just like a whole bunch of things, and you are looking at clues, trying to figure out what might be happening here or what might be happening there, and are the characters going to do this, or is the plot going to make them do that, or whatever. It always keeps you guessing, but the heart of it uh is basically a puzzle. And this is a specific type of genre, right? So puzzle storytelling has been around for a really long time. And part of the reason that it is, I think, so interesting is that I don't know if you ever read when you were a kid the choose your own adventures, or you get into like a chapter of the book, and if you want the character to do one thing, then you jump ahead to chapter 5, or if you want the character to do something else, then you jump ahead to chapter 3 or whatever. That's I've always been so fascinated with the idea behind narrative storytelling that is in sort of the shape, if you will, of a puzzle. And feel like that is always an interesting idea, because you're sort of manipulating the viewer into maybe thinking one thing when it's actually another, or you are just giving them enough information to take a quick peek behind, and then you close the door and you start telling the story again, and it just leaves you with a ton of questions. um, I think that this style of film is really interesting, and it's a pretty wide swath of films that fit into this particular type of genre. So um I don't think you have to worry that your movies, if you don't think that they are puzzle films, if they're not like, some kind of very specific movie, I don't think you have to worry because, again, this is pretty broad. So the movies that I'm going to talk about tonight really have in the heart of their storytelling is something that the audience has to figure out, or something that we're along with the characters to figure out with them. And our questions might be as deep as the characters, and sometimes we might know the answers a little bit sooner than they do, but a lot of times these movies don't tell us anything until the very end. So I'm hoping that it's going to be interesting.
Well, like Choose Your Own Adventure, two things. One, it's always interesting, and two, um, it doesn't count if you leave your finger on the page.
It doesn't count if you leave what on the page?
If you leave your finger on the page,
Oh, I see. Okay.
as
Yeah.
long as you don't take your finger off that page, you can go back to it.
That's right. And you can always choose the other one because that one
Mhm.
actually might be more interesting. Yes. I spent so many nights reading those kinds of stories. They had a profound impact on me. I absolutely loved them. There was a whole series of kids books that were written that were choose your own adventures, and they were amazing. Part of the fun was trying to figure out, well, what should he do? Because some of those books ended in absolute disaster if you chose the wrong
Mhm.
thing. So, I mean, the stakes felt high. And as a reader, that's rare, right? So I think that's why I like this in filmmaking.
Have you ever, not to get us too off track here, but have you ever fallen down the YouTube rabbit hole of the choose your own adventure stuff that people
No,
have
I
made?
have not actually. I've heard that, but I have not actually done it myself.
For just a bunch of friends with a camera that they actually do a very good job.
Oh, nice. I mean,
I
it
would
sounds fun.
wish I could give you a specific channel to go to, but the ones that I've seen, excellent.
Nice. Well,
What?
let's. I'm thinking that this is going to be both a very interesting style of list because it's going to be very eclectic, but it's also going to possibly raise just as many questions as the movies raise. So let's see.
Let's. Well, I think you should start off.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start off with a movie that I actually suggested last week as an example of this kind of movie because I think that this movie does a really good job of being this specific type that I was thinking. So I chose for my number 10 Cube. I still remember when I watched the movie Cube, how confused I was, and it didn't seem to make any sense at all. And honestly, I don't even know until I kind of got to Cube 2 did I really start to understand what to look for scene by scene. And they've of course changed it up in Cube 2, but in Cube, when I first watched it, I had no idea what I was actually watching. And every single box that they go through, it's basically a multi-dimensional box. We don't know if it's just 3 dimensions or not because it's kind of impossible to tell. But these people wake up in the cube and have no idea what they're doing there. And they end up meeting other people along the way. There are all these like odd sort of little associations that they might have with each other, but they can't quite track them all down. The cubes themselves work in really odd ways. Some of them have poisonous gas, some of them have lasers, some of them have freezing cold temperatures. There's just a whole gamut of stuff. And basically they're trying to figure out how to get out of this thing. And yeah, in a cube where the rooms just keep going on and on and on. And obviously the rooms also are shifting because sometimes the doors will close and then they'll open up the door and there'll be a brand new room behind it. So the rooms, it's kind of like a giant Rubik's cube. The rooms are changing too. uh I think that this is one of the best examples of just sort of at the heart of what puzzle storytelling is. The characters, they're not particularly compelling or anything, but they're fun to watch on this journey. And I mean, my only problem with Cube is I never actually felt like I cared for any of the characters. And as a result, it kind of, didn't make for the best of the best. but it still fits comfortably at number 10. It's a great example of a puzzle movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth it. It's even worth it to watch the other movies. I mean, some of them get really ridiculous, but Cube as a franchise was actually a pretty fun franchise while it lasted. So, number 10, Cube.
I've seen this,
Yay!
and I enjoyed it very much.
It was kind of silly, yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you aspiring filmmakers out there, this is how you do a sort of a singular location and do it well. Change up a few things here and there, and bam, you don't really have to change sets all that much.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's some behind the scenes stuff where they talk about how they reused the set, um, and basically just added different elements, created different lighting, but basically they were on sort of like the same set design over and over and over again. So minimal cost, lots and lots of payoff.
Well, it just so happens my number 10 has that going for it as well.
Ooh.
Uh, with a budget of $7,000, it pulled in
Oh my god.
over 800,000.
Wow.
I'm talking about, of course, the 2004 time travel indie film Primer.
Oh, that was a great movie. That movie almost made my list, Josh. So you're definitely
Okay,
on the right track.
okay, feeling a little more confident.
Yeah.
For those of you unaware, it's like I said, it's an indie film made for seven grand, and it's about time. I just repeating myself here. Anyway, it's about these two guys. They make a time machine and they use it without really thinking of what the consequences of these actions could be. They have that, I'll say, the Jurassic Park problem of just because you can, maybe you should stop and ask yourself if you should. And that's a question I ask myself on a daily basis, and the answer is usually no, probably shouldn't. But the idea that these two guys who are, absolutely brilliant, are mucking about in time, uh, and well, really taking things very personal. When you say, you know,
Yeah, I would say this. I think one of the reasons, although it didn't make it to my list just because there were so many other really good things above it, but
mhm,
honestly, this movie did so much for character development, in terms of like the raw, um none of them knew what they were doing, and it just shows like so starkly that the repercussions of what they do are just so unfathomable. It's kind of interesting. It's very interesting to take that journey along with people, because I think in some ways, of course, we as the audience don't know what's going to happen.
mhm.
We don't know what they set into motion, right? But at at some point, didn't you start feeling like you started thinking, okay, but what if it's this? But wait a minute, what if it's this?
And then I don't want to say a new character, but a character you're familiar with suddenly appears in a new way
Right.
and throws everything you know out the window, and you have to start almost from square one, trying to put the pieces back together, as now these characters that shouldn't exist simultaneously are interacting with each other, and it gets. I'll put it to you this way: even after I watched it, I still had that question: what did I just watch? What what happened? And someone pointed me to a diagram, and I was like, oh, I get it. because, like a puzzle, I was finally seeing like the entire picture all at once. It's like, okay, okay.
Yeah, the Primer is the kind of movie where everything has a correlation, but you don't know the correlation until other correlations appear. So it gets really, it gets convoluted really fast, but it's done really well. Like there's no loose ends in Primer. Primer is not the kind of movie where you're like, going, "Wait a minute, what about this?" Because everything is pretty neatly cinched. So, yeah, this made a great puzzle movie.
And that's why Primer is my number 10.
Nice. Good choice. Very good choice. Okay, so my number 9 movie is a movie that when I first saw it, I actually kind of didn't like it. I saw it and I thought, Why? Why? What about this movie is making me not happy? Why do I not like these characters and what's happening?" And turns out the reason that I didn't like it is because by the end of the film you realize, oh, okay, yeah, you're not actually supposed to like what's happening. It was with Sandra Bullock. It's called Premonition. It was a 2007 film. Now, what happens basically in Premonition is, so I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it a supernatural thriller, okay? Because I think that that best describes the genre. But what happens is Sandra Bullock's character is sort of, she's, I don't want to call her psychic, but she has this premonition, and she does something that, or actually she, well, I won't say she does something. She wakes up and realizes that things are not the way they're supposed to be. And then things go back to the way that they were. But then things kind of change again. And the shifting in what is reality and what isn't reality is really disconcerting. Like it's weird. Um in one scene, her husband, whose name is Jim, his head falls out. And and just before that, everything had been fine. So like, well, what's going on? What's happening? There's this like, there's a whole bunch of characters that are like undefined characters. The best way I can describe them is they're like, NPC stranger danger. Like you know that they're important even though you can't really tell exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Um there are all kinds of things that happen afterwards that then kind of go back to, okay, yeah, but now everything is fine. She's actually, Jim is alive. I mean, you know, he's in the shower. Okay, so what's going on? And then there's all of these other sort of like little clues that begin to pile up, and I'm not going to say that we ever really exactly know what's happening, but by the end of the movie, we have a really good idea of what's about to transpire. And what she does is she kind of gets the she gets the idea of what happened. But when she gets the idea of what happened, some things that weren't even supposed to happen had already happened. And at the end of the film, there's kind of like a big sort of surprise that happens. I won't give that part away because I think that this is actually a fun movie to watch. But the surprise at the end of the movie is something that couldn't have happened if the narrative had been just a clean narrative, and that her premonition didn't actually transport her to a different place. So that makes it, I think, really super interesting. And then, there's like some numbery things that are going on, and you're like watching the numbers. You're looking at like her kids, and somebody suspects, her of like child abuse, and it's just crazy stuff. It's good. It's really good. Um, so Premonition makes my number 9. It's definitely worth it to watch if you haven't seen it. It is it's actually a really fun, hey, how am I going to put all this stuff together kind of movie. So, number 9, Premonition.
Not one that I've seen.
It's super interesting. And I have to say that, I like Sandra Bullock in a lot of stuff, but I really liked her in this because she wasn't Sandra Bullock, if you know what I mean. Like, she didn't
Yeah.
have any of the Sandra Bullock, like, oh yeah, I've got so much moxie, and and I'm not saying that that's bad or anything. I like that, but it's just like sometimes that can be the most prominent thing about her. And in this movie, it wasn't. It really wasn't. Everything was very sort of like, wow, when did I get into the upside down?
I'm gonna have to put that on my check it out list. Haven't really watched a lot of movies recently. I did watch the Woody Harrelson basketball flick. That's Not White Men Can't Jump. So that was pretty cool.
White Men Don't Jump.
What? Yeah. Yeah.
I was just throwing movie titles out there. I'm always watching movies, so yeah.
I've been very busy lately. It's like between the day job and running a business and being a dad, it's been a little hectic.
I often watch movies while I work, so I have a slightly that would be very problematic for you. I
they're like,
suggest
keep our eyes on the road. Like,
yeah. So, but I can leave them on in the background, and yeah.
So my number.
I have a little up on you. Sorry, I'll just keep adding to my library. Also, I'm a couple of years older than you are, so I definitely have more there too.
Well, nobody believes that.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Anyway,
whether it's true or not is irrelevant. Nobody believes it.
Yeah.
My number 9.
That's good. Number 9.
Oh man, we're only at number 9, and things are having a lot of fun.
It is actually.
Yeah.
It's gonna get better too.
Okay. Breathe.
Go for number 9.
Because I'm very nervous. You already know this.
Okay.
So my number 9. It's a movie that I've talked about before. Returning to 10-2-1 is Richard Kelly's Southland Tales. It is a multi-perspective feature that has multiple protagonists between Boxer Santaros, an action star played by Dwayne Johnson, Roland Taverner and Ronald Taverner, twin brothers played by Sean William Scott, and a bunch of other people. John Larroquette's in it, does a great job. Kevin Smith has a cameo. We were talking earlier about the show, and I mentioned, I do have a movie with Kevin Smith in it, although no Kevin Smith movies. And yes, he has a cameo in this. If you haven't seen Southland Tales, it's definitely one that you're either going to love or you're going to think it's absolutely terrible. I find it that not many people are kind of in the middle with this one. But as far as the theme of tonight's show, it is filled with a lot of interesting things that, like the movies we've talked about so far, once you see everything in like full view, it kind of comes together. You have Boxer and the Taverner brothers that are kind of feeling the effects of something, and then they're not quite sure what's going on. And as the story progresses, we get clued in onto what's happening to them. And it really is what's happening to them that's caused by the government, essentially, as this mystery unfolds. There's time travel elements. There's a bit of um, a theological. Um, it's not really a subtext. It's kind of right there in your face at times, but time travel elements and a great uh, musical number of Justin Timberlake doing all these things that I've done from the Killers. It's, in my opinion, a great movie, and it's difficult to really talk about the pieces of the puzzle without, you say one thing and then you're like, well, that needs an explanation. So let me backtrack and talk about this. No, it's it's a movie that had a prequel comic series for the movie to kind of set things up, because originally it wasn't going to be just a movie. It was set up to be this multimedia, almost interactive um, event, if you will. And it was very ambitious in its undertaking, but because of a poorly received outing, I believe it was at Cannes. It was, who was it? It was Universal that had the rights to it and then sold it to Sony. I might have that backwards, but either way, the rights to it were sold, and to get the money to finish the special effects, Richard Kelly had to cut down on the runtime and like can half of the prequel comic series. So basically, you got a very abridged version of what the actual vision was. Now, the cast, like I said, Dwayne Johnson, Sean William Scott, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Mandy Moore, Justin Timberlake. Mind you, this is all in like 2006, when these people were all kind of top of the pops, if you will. And the funny thing is, you mentioned these people are all in a movie together, and more than half the time, you are going to see people's faces go, "Huh? There's a rock movie I haven't seen with Justin Timberlake and Sarah Michelle Gellar, Mandy Moore. Yeah, yeah. It's all about the mystery of figuring out what's going on, not just with these three guys, but with the world. There's something wrong with the world. And as um, things go on, and I wish I could say it clears up, no, it just gets more weird. And after a while, you're just keep getting more and more questions you want answered. And I think that's one of the reasons why people have an issue with it. But like I said, at the end, it sort of all comes together. And to me, it's just very satisfying to see that grand picture, that finished puzzle. To me, it's a wonderful time. And if you get a chance to watch it, Southland Tales is a highly, highly recommended movie from me, and that's why it's my number 9.
So, although I think I can see the reasoning behind why this would make it onto a list like this, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's actually a choice that I would have made, because I don't know if it actually works as a puzzle. Like I feel like there isn't enough sort of things being obfuscated in for our benefit, for the viewers' benefit.
Like
Um,
not getting enough of not getting enough hints, if you will, not
um,
getting that
I
peek
don't
at the box
I
every
don't
once in a
know.
while.
Yeah, like it doesn't, it's not, and it isn't something that we're like, we can't unfold it. And I have to say, I have to go back to Cube, because we're not supposed to we're not supposed to unravel Cube. We're not supposed to know what's going on in Cube. That's not, the audience is just supposed to be as confused as as the participants of the cube are. But what makes it a good puzzle movie is it always seems like we are one step into understanding, right? So we look at, okay, well, what is it that makes this work, and then we do sort of manage to get some idea of how a cube works, why, they are looking at different facets of the rooms to try to get clues and stuff like that. And they do actually get to a place, but most of the movies that are on my list, although we're along for the ride, um, I feel like there is a sort of like opaqueness that happens in these movies, and then it becomes slightly translucent, and then it becomes opaque again. So we're only supposed to kind of guess a little bit about what is happening. So I don't know, I mean, maybe that works, and I don't, maybe it doesn't. But
I,
I'll tell you what my number 8 is, and you can, and then because number 8, I think, actually sort of is it's the middle ground between all of these. um my number 8 movie is a movie called The Platform. And The Platform, when it came out on Netflix, was really popular. I mean, like, everybody and their brother saw The Platform. And it sort of spirals into this territory of, okay, well, there's these people, and, like a lot of these movies, this person wakes up and doesn't really know where he is, doesn't understand what's happening. W- what are the rules of this special world that I'm in? And um so what ends up happening is he starts to learn about this place that he's in. He the, the Okay, so the central point, I'll just give it. The central point of this movie is there is a hole in the middle of a square cell. And through this hole, a platform comes down every single day. And at the end of every day, the platform rushes back up, like, super, super fast. But as the platform is coming down, there's food filled on the platform. And each successive level that you're on, there's basically less and less food. And it's kind of a social commentary, on top of it being a puzzle, about, class system and tiers of humanity, and how we treat tiers of humanity. Do we treat people who are, quote unquote, below us better? Do we save things for them? Are there expendable resources that we can, kind of keep for ourselves, or are we going to share equally? There's all of these questions. It's actually really quite interesting in that respect. But the part that makes this a puzzle film is we don't know anything about this platform. We don't understand what it is, or where we are in this place, and how it's working, or why it's working. Later we kind of understand. Um, and and part of the reason that this works so good as a puzzle film is, one, we keep experiencing things where people don't know who they are, or maybe not who they are, but where they are, and they don't understand why they are in the position that they're in. And so the person who sort of is the new person at the beginning of the film, become the mentoree, becomes the mentor at the end, or toward the end. And he has to then tell this other person the rules of the platform and the place that they're in. Now, the further that we get on this thing, the better it kind of unfolds and begins. And eventually he takes a journey on the platform itself and goes through all these successive layers. Um, it's kind of fascinating altogether, because we don't know what's above them. We don't know what's below them. We know there is something above and below. And until we actually go on this ride, we have no clue what is going to happen. Um, so the little bits of story that we get that are supposed to give us clues about what might be happening, they're really small. And eventually we start to put all of those pieces together. And by the end, we have a better working understanding of what's really happening. And then there's this big event that happens at the very end that is like Oh God, no wonder this is happening. Um, so it's super, super cool that way. As a puzzle story, as a story that tells a story, or I should say, as a film that tells a story that is a puzzle, the platform m- makes me really happy, because it doesn't skip the we're all as confused as you are stage, but it also doesn't just leave you in the dark. It actually seeks to create, and this is a foreign film. So, you know, you even have sort of English language as a barrier altogether because this is not the language that they're speaking in. So, even despite that, it's still just as good. Despite the fact that it's dubbed, it's still as good as I think, or I should say, deserves a really good place on the list because as a puzzle film, you're definitely left guessing until the very end. So, number 8 for me is the platform. And again, it just speaks to this that level of like, okay, it's opaque, little bit of translucence or transparency. Oh, hey, there's a clue maybe. And then everything goes back to, oh, wait a minute. Nope, I don't know anything. What am I saying? I don't know. Could be anything at this point. So there you go.
I wish I had seen the platform.
You didn't see the platform?
No, no, I haven't seen the platform.
Oh. Oh, it's that's definitely worth a, Saturday hour and a half.
I'm pretty sure that if I had, everything would like clear up for me in this puzzle that I'm living in. Would the big picture would come. So how about this? I'll name my next one, and you say yes or oh God, Josh, you're an idiot.
Okay, I'll try to be I'll try to be I'll try to be, what's a good word for this? Um I'll 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 try to preserve your ego. Go.
I don't have one of those. So my number 8 is the Prestige.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Prestige is great.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I feel like I can dive into this now confidently. All right. So you got a couple of feuding magicians, right? The hows and whys aren't nearly as important. Let's just say somebody died, and it was a wife. And you know what? Just okay. Someone's wife died during a trick, made them part ways. Yada yada yada. One's, you know, a great. Well, they're both good, but to get right down to it, there was a trick that was created, right? That
Yep.
you know, what was it called, the teleporting man or something like that. The hold on, the transported man,
The
the
transported
transported
man.
man, and the idea was, of course, he enters the thing and kaplow, abracadabra, he's somewhere else. And the thing is, the former um, mentor, was he the mentor?
I guess, yeah, I think you would be the mentor.
Was like, what? How did you do that? And sort of devoted his life to figuring out this mystery and what's
Right.
going on and how is he doing it. He even tried to imitate it, and it didn't cut the mustard when he just used a double because
So can I interject something real quick?
oh sure.
Okay, so because I do think that this is important in terms of how the puzzle aspect of this gets laid out. So there are stage magicians. They're basically like,
Mhm.
in
David
sort of,
Copperfield.
Old times, right, exactly, yes. But the rival stage magicians. And this is set in Victorian London. So
Yeah.
there is sort of like there's an epicness about the period storytelling in this. First off, that's like one part, but then the second part is, wait, well, how did he really do it? And also, I just have to mention that the cast in this is so on point. It's Scarlett Johansson, Michael Caine, Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Andy Serkis, Rebecca Hall, David Bowie. Just excellent, just really excellent stuff going on in here. So
You said Michael Caine? Who's that?
yeah, Michael Caine was in this movie.
Oh, you mean Mike O'Kane.
Yeah, that guy. Not your cocaine, but yeah, okay.
I'm going to say that every time forever. Directed by Christopher Nolan. Can't forget that. One of, you know what? Just going to let that Christopher Nolan thing uh, sink in for a second because
And there's the
Oscar
whole
picker.
the whole thing that I loved about the Prestige so much, not to steal your show from me, but the whole thing that I
No,
loved
no.
about Prestige so much was the fact that Tesla was like such an operative part of this, that it kind of like, it almost makes you feel like, well, oh, what do they know that we don't know? And I love that. I love that so much because it's like this huge shout out to the future from the past. And I thought that was excellent. So anyway, yes, keep going. Sorry.
Well, as I said, the key, the big mystery is how is this trick done? And like any good magician, which I'm not, but I'm going to pretend like I am for this segment, I'm not going to tell you. But let's say that when things are unraveled, as in film they tend to be, you will be left uh, gobstopped. I think that's a fair assessment. Gobstopped. It's the term that's not used nearly enough nowadays. But the Prestige, if you like good performances and if you love good directing and if you dig, you know, a mystery that is certainly not going to be figured out in the first, you know, we'll say 120 minutes. Yeah, it's longer. It's longer than 2 hours. So this is definitely one for you because you will be left guessing the entire time exactly what the heck is going on. And when that last piece gets flipped, mind blown time. It is Nolan at his best, and that's why it's my number 8. The
Such a
Prestige.
good choice. It's that was really a good choice. That, I think, is sort of like that, and that's almost like literal puzzle storytelling. I mean, like, I actually have, there's two on my list that are like that too, where the puzzle is the point. Um, eh, like, you don't know how something happened, and because you don't know how something happened, it has to be pieced together little by little. But in this case, it's not really that it needs to be pieced together little by little, it's that you have to have faith in the characters that they'll tell you how all of this transpired, which is kind of cool. Um and and it makes you, um I don't know. I feel like Hugh Jackman gave an amazing performance in this. I mean, absolutely amazing. I can never ever get over Christian Bale. I just don't like him at all. But it's okay. In this movie, he was actually really good. So this movie actually reminds me of another movie. It's not the same. It doesn't have the same plot, but it reminds me of a movie called The Illusionist, which was done in 2006. And The Illusionist
Yeah, so
is
we're right around the same time.
Yeah, it makes me, kind of gives me that feel like, how a script in Hollywood is like, I don't know, when it comes around, it's like, oh yeah, hey, let's make one of these movies.
Armageddon, Deep Impact, Ants, A
Yeah,
Bug's Life. Yeah.
and this movie is also, got that like, sort of old timey sort of feel. Um, Edward Norton is in it, Rufus Sewell's in it, and and it's about a magic trick, and the focus of the whole thing is the magic trick. So anyway, yeah, Ritgo was a good choice. I feel like that was perfect. Okay, my number seven. My number seven is one of the weirder movies on my list. I have to admit that when I first saw this movie, I was completely, uh, I don't know, dumbstruck. Maybe might that might be a little bit too strong. I was kind of like, I didn't understand what the heck was supposed to be really going on. And I was trying. I mean, like, I was really using my best sort of deconstruction story brain to figure it out. And for me, that's like, I don't know, that's big. If I can't figure it out, if I'm like looking at things and not finding the right clues, it sort of throws me off a bit. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be like, okay, you guys totally missed the mark. But in The Fountain, a movie that was also released in 2006, um, it basically is telling a story over three different time periods. This also has Hugh Jackman in it, so yay for that. In the Hugh Jackman is a 1700s conquistador. It's like super cool. His characters are so great.
It got ships,
And
doesn't it?
it well, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
actually. The Fountain also is like, it starts from um the sort of the modern day, where the main character, whose name is Tommy, is basically like questioning his own morality, his own mortality. Morality is not the same as mortality. And his wife has cancer, and his search to find a cure for her cancer is kind of the heart of The Fountain. Now, I'm going to say that, like, personally, I feel like this is a sweeping romance. It's the kind of stuff that if you read it in a book, which I don't even, this might have been based on a book, I don't know. But if you read it in a book, you would just be like enraptured and just, swept away in a similar way that sometimes Outlander can sweep you away. But the part that makes The Fountain so interesting from a puzzle point of view is, it really doesn't give you the clues right up front that you need to figure out what is happening. And you begin to understand that everything is interconnected, and that the point of everything is not to necessarily find an answer, but to understand what mortality really is all about. Um, it's fascinating. This story is so wonderfully woven together. Telling storylines over different time periods is really difficult. And I don't mean it's difficult for filmmakers, it's actually quite easy for filmmakers, but it is very difficult for people to keep the thread of what's happening without making them too confused. And The Fountain does a really good job, I think, of sort of blurring the line just a little bit, but giving you plenty of information in each individual facet, each individual time slip, to identify what's happening. And as a result, you feel very connected to all three segments instead of feeling like it's all just very disconnected. Um, it's quite amazing. It's actually quite amazing. Um, I will say that this is sad. This movie is really sad. But I feel like it's sad in the sense that it is the ultimate affirmation of life, and that death is not, it's hard to even explain, but you know, th- there's this acceptance that life and death exist on the same plane, and basically are all very interconnected, have very um different but similar threads. And without sort of like giving everything away, um all the pieces that go into this movie are an affirmation of life even when they feel like they're not. So although the end is very sad, it's fulfilling and it's sad. So I highly suggest this movie. It's absolutely amazing. Hugh Jackman stars in three different roles in this. Rachel Weisz is in it. I love Rachel Weisz. In fact, guys, if you get a chance, Rachel Weisz is in a new series right now on Amazon Prime called Dead Ringers, and oh my gosh, she is absolutely on fire. She plays twins. She's unbelievably great. So anyway, Rachel Weisz is in this. It's really good. So I highly suggest it. The Fountain, my number 7.
I'm sorry, I was just looking at it, the letterbox page for it. I gotta say, was not expecting to be kind of captivated by what this movie is, and kind of feel like it's a must watch for me now.
It's insanely good. You know what? I never would have watched this movie myself, just based on what was sort of said about it in pre-press, because it just didn't seem like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. It doesn't seem like it's that great.
Hmm.
But a friend of mine had rented it and said, no, you got to sit down and watch this. It's just absolutely amazing. And as I was watching it with them, I mean, I was blown away. I was absolutely blown away. It is absolutely, I think, one of the better made movies that deals with this particular type of storytelling, and that it's not easy to figure out what's going on. I mean, I gave away a lot, but it's not easy to figure out what's going on. It's very kind of like life, confusing, and things happen and you don't really understand why they're happening. But by the end, you're like, oh, I see. And it all kind of just fits together like that last piece of a jigsaw puzzle that makes the whole picture come together. And you're like, oh, okay, I got it. I see what's happening here. So, yeah, I definitely think that you would love it.
Okay, that gets added to the watch list immediately.
Nice.
All right. I guess that leads me to my number 7, if my numbers are correct.
Number 7. Yes, indeed.
All right, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Um, Hopefully, you're still on board to either say amen or shut up, you heathen.
I'm not that mean, but yeah, okay.
I'm just letting you know what the two extremes could be. All right, my number 7 is The Life of David Gale.
Oh, Life of David Gale. You know what? You're gonna have to explain that movie because I don't think it doesn't like ring a bell in my head.
Okay, well, it's 2003. It stars Kate Winslet, and uh, at this point in time, he who shall not be named, but made a killer Bobby Darin. It is about the life of David Gale. Okay, that probably doesn't clear anything up.
No,
Okay,
not too much. No.
David Gale is a death row inmate, and the, of course, ironic thing is he is, what do you call somebody that's against the death penalty?
On death row.
He's an anti death penalty advocate.
Oh, okay.
So he's a member of a group that wants to help abolish the death penalty,
Got
and
it.
then ironically, he is tried and sentenced for a murder that he says he didn't commit. And the thing is, he has, well, he doesn't have it, but he knows there's evidence out there that could exonerate him. But he kind of wants to not do that because his plan is to be wrongly executed to help his cause. But as Kate Winslet, the reporter covering this, finds, this thread and begins to unravel, it begins this kind of ping pong back and forth where it's, did he do it? He did it. No, he didn't do it. But he did do it. But then he didn't do it. And as the movie's progressing, it just keeps going back and forth as you're seeing through Kate Winslet's eyes that she's fighting this conflicting evidence for this for this case, and it all culminates to you get sort of an idea of what the truth may be, and then a few more times, like right there at the climax, it flips everything on its head a couple more times until finally the big picture is revealed. It's a film with great performances. Unfortunately, the male lead is sort of persona non grata when it comes to being a topic of conversation outside of, well, did you hear about the things they might have done? And that's, I'm not saying it's unfortunate because he should be welcomed back with open arms. No, nothing like that. I'm saying it's unfortunate because this is a person that has a tremendous talent, and to hear the thing, it's Kevin Spacey. I'm just going to say it's Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey's been very problematic in recent years as far as personal life decisions, and it's very unfortunate that this movie's kind of dragged down, even though it was released long before anything like that ever came of light. But it's hard for me to say, well, just get over your personal feelings for whatever happened and just watch this great movie. I get it. I will say though that it is a wonderful film. I'm not going to give away the ending because it is one that will surprise you. And if you feel comfortable partaking in the life of David Gale, maybe you just feel satisfied seeing Kevin Spacey in a prison jumpsuit. Who knows? But I think it's worth a watch. And that's why it made my number 7.
I also have a Kevin Spacey movie on mine. So.
No, good. Then yeah. I'm glad we got that out of the way.
Because we can totally dislike the artist, but we can still appreciate the art. So can go that direction. Okay. So I feel like that was actually a good choice. I have not actually seen that movie, so
what?
I'll definitely add that to my list. I have not seen that. It's interesting. I like the subject as much as I like the delivery. So yeah, that could be a good one. Okay, my number 6 movie is really super straightforward, and everybody knows it. Everybody who is anybody knows this story, probably could recite it pretty much backwards, forwards, whichever way. Every time they do a remake of this, they always add a little hmm, finesse, a little fleur de lis onto the inevitable storytelling. Sometimes they tell it one way, sometimes they tell it in a backwards way, sometimes they tell it in an inside out way. I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways to tell a story, but it centers on a murder on a train. In fact, the train is called the Orient Express, and there you go. There's the title, Murder on the Orient Express. Um, I have to say that okay, so the particular one that I chose was the most recent because I number one really really love the cinematography in this movie. I just absolutely felt like especially the close scenes were almost claustrophobic on the train, and wow, it just really made it really good. But there is one that was done in 1971. That one also is amazing. There, one that I'm talking about was one that was done in 2017, and of course, you know the detective is Hercule. I absolutely love the whole Inspector Poirot uh, piece. Everything that Agatha Christie did was just so on point. It was just excellent. But in this, the reason that I think that this was actually good, first of all, Kenneth Branagh was amazing. I don't always like Kenneth Branagh and everything because sometimes I feel like his gravitas is just like almost distracting. But in this, it really did work, and the parts with Willem Dafoe are awesome. Judy Dench is in it. Penelope Cruz is in it. Um, David Annan. Am I saying his name right? David Annan. I forgot how you say his name. He's the priest. Um, Elliot Levi, who's the rabbi. Um, Everybody does such a good job. Daisy Ridley is in this. There's so many good, excellent people in this movie, and they all play their part so well. Now, the thing, even though everybody knows the story of the Murder on the Orient Express, the reason that this is such a successful puzzle film is because the storytelling is always, I think, a little bit different each time we see this story unravel. And in this particular case, we get a lot of interesting clues along the way that maybe we don't always think about concentrating on, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, this is actually pretty cool. Look at the way that they are showing us this or telling us that, or and you know, even if you know how this is going to end, it's still worth watching because you still always get that feeling of, well, do I actually know? I mean, did they change who the killer was in this one? What's happening? Um, I loved everything about this. I mean, truly everything about this. I love the fact that Johnny Depp is in this. I don't know how to describe that other than to say that he just makes such a good character. um, and all I feel like the people who naysay this movie don't understand what's supposed to be happening here. Like, it isn't supposed to be a new and novel story. It is a well tread story. Agatha Christie is Agatha Christie. And in and there's also something about the in your face kind of, you know, yes, of course, this is we're sleuthing who the killer is, but more than sleuthing who the killer is, we are discovering who the passengers really are. And they all have secrets and they all have, you know, all these strange things that are going on for them, and that makes the movie. The movie is really about who the characters are as much as it is who was the killer. And the only way that we figure out who the killer was is by discovering all these secrets about who the passengers are. I love this movie. I wish more people liked it. I also think that people just hated on this movie for no particular reason. I just cannot understand it. But anyway, it gets my number 6 pick. I really love this movie. I love, love, love the inside of the train. Absolutely gorgeous.
It's a wonderful film.
Yeah, I
I can
really,
say that
really
because I've
liked it.
seen it.
I really liked it. Johnny Depp as a gangster is so great. Just so awesome.
I wish I could say Death on the Nile was
See, that
as
wasn't
good.
it wasn't as good, and also I didn't get the puzzly feeling from it. I mean, yes, there's a murder, but I never got this sort of like, but could it be different this time? Could there be something I don't know? Uh, in Murder on the Orient Express, I really, really got sucked in to
Yeah,
Everybody's Got a Secret, and yeah, like it was good,
I.
really good.
It's a story that's been told, like you said, a bunch of different ways. And my favorite, I think, off-brand telling of the story is probably Doctor Who, Space Train. I don't know
Oh,
if you've seen that one.
yes, I think I have actually seen that one.
It's really good. Really good. Okay, my number 6. It's funny because last week I talked about the number 4, but this week my number 6 is all about the number 1.
Oh, okay.
You're not the only one with puzzles here.
Ooh.
I guess that's more of a math problem, really. Anyway, my number 6 is the uh, the first Mission Impossible movie.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a green light. Okay, so here we are. It's Mission Impossible. You know, Mission is Impossible, but it's definitely far cry from what it started out as. If you want more detailed analysis of that, just listen to last week's episode where we talked about fours. So I'm just going to get right into this movie. It begins essentially with Ethan Hunt and not his team because he's just a member of the team at this point, working under Phelps. The entire team being killed. And he's out there on his own, trying to figure out what happened. There was a mole. Who's the mole? Who's the one responsible for killing his entire team? So he's trying to figure out this bit. Finds a Bible. Uh, well, he finds out that there's a contact named Gideon. So he looks in the Bible and he's like, it's got to be something biblical that I can use here. And he starts finding the trail and flipping pieces to try to get an idea of what exactly happened to him and his team on that night. A lot of twists, a lot of turns as each piece gets uncovered, and you're finding out that the problem, the real underlying issue was much bigger than he could have imagined. Basically, the conspiracy starts kind of unraveling around him. And when he finally figures out what's going on, he does something that I don't. I think I don't see this quite enough in films where he figures it out, but he's not telling you. It's not that he's just keeping the secret. He's not telling you he knows. He's not letting you, the audience, know he knows. And he just kind of lets it play out until he gets to the point where he can say, "Oh, you thought you were surprising me, but no, It is I who surprise you and you, the audience, because you had no idea that I know all this. But if you look back, if you look at the previous scenes, of this film you're watching, if you look back, you'll see that the clues were there the whole time. The whole time, always playing out, sometimes in the background. So, you see a couple of people. Are they in on it? The answer is, of course, oh, yeah, absolutely. But are they the good guys or the bad guys? Oh, that's the question. And Ethan, of course, figures out which is which. But I think the best part is the stuff that just stares you right in the face. The stuff that makes, when they point back to it, you're like, it was there the whole time? Which I don't know if it would really be spoilers for a movie from 1996. You think it's safe to spoil the first Mission Impossible at this point? Or should I just err on the side of caution?
I mean, it's old.
Okay, then I'll just kind of halfway do it. The Bible ties everything together, and he gets that like immediately, but he doesn't understand the significance until later, when he finds out who led his team to their deaths, who killed Emilio Estevez, the tech guy. Yes, Emilio Estevez was in a movie in 1996 and died immediately. That's a tragedy, I know. But Mission Impossible is my number 6. It's one of, I think, one of my first spy thrillers that I absolutely fell in love with as a teenager. And, it's cool that there's still Mission Impossible movies today, but I'm in the camp of, I wish they would have stayed just a tad bit more cerebral rather than going straight for, action flick boom explosion extravaganzas. Brian De Palma did a pretty cool thing with this old IP and reinvigorated. Kind of like, if you want to compare it to something else as far as movie franchises go, it would be like saying, Jon Favreau doesn't get nearly enough credit for building the MCU, the look, the style. Brian De Palma just basically built the character of Ethan Hunt and how awesome he is. It's just, they only kept that and kind of disregarded the fact that, it was a really killer spy flick. But I still watch the new ones because I like boom explosions. Mission Impossible, number 6.
That I feel like that actually was a pretty good choice, quite honestly. Yeah. I don't, I guess when you say it the way you say it, it does make sense. I don't know if I would have seen it that way, but it does make sense when you say it that way. So I guess that works.
I think.
Yeah, I do. Okay, cracking into the top 5 here. I'm gonna go with a movie that is universally misunderstood. The movie is called 12 Monkeys. Um, I don't know a single person that I've ever seen this movie with or asked to explain it to me who explains it the same way. Everybody has a different idea about what this movie is either about or how this movie what they think the movie is actually trying to say. And that I think makes it perfect for our movies about or puzzle movies because it truly is kind of a puzzle. He appears to be time traveling back and forth between two different times. There's a virus that gets released on the earth and it really decimates entire populations, and they send him back, they send Cole back to try to figure out, hey, what's happening, what can you stop what has happened. And what we really kind of come to find out is that there is an inevitability cycle that's happening here. But perspective on everything is it matters. How you perceive time, um, how you how you understand your own memories in terms of your own perceptions can change the history of things. But does it actually change the history for everybody else? Well, that's a good question, and I feel like that's kind of how the movie uh, tries to unravel this mystery of does it um does it affect anything. There's not a lot I can say about 12 Monkeys that hasn't sort of already been said. I mean, it's a very well known movie, but I will say that this is one of the coolest movies that deals with sort of understanding that or not understanding that our perceptions of time and reality are rooted in our own minds, and as a result what we think it was true n- was true for us, but it may not have been true for everyone else. And it's such a weird slippery slope, and it works off of these psychological and philosophical principles which are truly mind bending. So I'm just going to say 12 Monkeys is my number 5 choice and not give a whole lot out about it. If you haven't seen it, um it's better if you don't know a lot about it before you watch it, cuz there's so many things that happen in this movie that kind of require you to take a little bit of leap of faith. So there you go.
I saw it in the drive-in. It was very dark, so I'm not really sure if I've seen it because it was I was what 13. Hard to follow at times, mostly
Yeah,
because of the place I was seeing it.
it was hard to follow. It was, I think intentionally it was, um it bordered on obnoxious sometimes. And I feel like that was extremely intentional. Like that's how intrusive memories are too. They're obnoxious, but they're real. They're things. And yeah, it makes you kind of go back and question maybe some of the things that you have perceived in the past and how you perceiving things in the past, what were they the catalyst for something else, or are they just fixed? And yeah, it's an interesting idea. I like this movie a lot.
Well, speaking of movies that I like a lot, weird transition. I'm very, very hesitant about this one because I think this might be, in some ways, my biggest reach of the night. So I'm acknowledging that first and foremost. And I just want to make sure we're aware that I'm aware. My number 5 is The Menu.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can see this one.
We don't know what's going on, but as each course is served, it sort of reveals just a little bit more.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. Are you saying that the menu is like onions? That it has layers? Or if
Yes.
you put it out in the sun, that it sprouts little brown hairs? Okay. Anyway, yeah.
Hmm. And if you serve it, you know what? I'm just gonna stop.
Okay. Well, sorry, we just had to do the Shrek shout out. It was mandatory. I had to do it.
But yes, the menu has layers, and the thing is, once you're on the surface, you don't know that you're about to peel away these really interesting and probably a bit psychotic episodes, and God, what a ride this movie is. I'm not even sure because it's definitely new enough to go. I don't want to spoil it, of course, but each each course sort of uh, goes into a different aspect of what's motivating chef to uh, do this particular dinner service. And once we get to the dessert course and everything is fully revealed, even though a good chunk of it is revealed, as again as each course moves along, you're getting bits and pieces of it. It's not until the dessert course where you're like, oh dear lord, what is this? Is this happening?
You might even say that the very end is the ultimate course correction. Okay, I'll see myself out.
Times like these, I wish we had cameras so they could see my face. So
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll just offer an audible.
Okay, that was worth it.
But when okay, but when we get to dessert and everything's revealed, it leaves you with this completed picture that, if you're not paying attention, still doesn't make complete sense. But the thing is, it shows you everything you need to know. I know some people have had some issues like, well, that did make sense. Well, you weren't paying attention then, were you? Just because there's not a character that, verbalizes this particular instance doesn't mean that there's nothing on the screen that is letting you know what's going on. Maybe it's the way a plate is, you know, set. Maybe it's, the color of something on the dish. Maybe it's something hanging on the wall. It it shows you exactly what you need to know, nothing more, to understand why things happen the way they happen. It's one of those movies that, well, like we've been talking about for all of Jen's picks, and like 60% of mine, uh, it's the puzzle, the slow reveal, and getting only bits and pieces, even if, like I said, they're not explicitly uh, explained to you, doesn't mean they're not there. The menu is, I think, a great example of show don't tell in a lot of ways, and it's a puzzle that I am eagerly anticipating seeing again. Hopefully, with some friends to kind of really have that discussion of what we're seeing on screen. So the menu is my number five.
Nice. You know what? I think that as a that as a film, the menu does a really good job of creating multi-dimensional layers with kind of connective tissue as the thread. And no, you don't know what's going on. But I also I kind of feel like the menu like it almost does a little bit too much in terms of giving us information. Although I guess if you weren't really looking for it, you wouldn't see it. But I think it's amazing. I actually that's the kind of movie that I absolutely love. um One of my friends calls movies like the puzzle, like the menu, hoity-toity movies, high class art kind of movies. I absolutely love it. I'll I gotta say one thing about this movie before I move on to mine. And my number four is an absolute dumpster fire. So everybody be prepared. Get a glass of water. Take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. Um, but in the menu, they actually didn't have enough. They thought shots of food, and of course, I do a blog called Movies and Meals, so food is kind of near and dear to my heart. And um, they went back into the film, and they inserted images, shots of the food. So as
Those
they're
hero shots,
showing
right?
you the food, yeah, as they're showing you that the food, that's not really what's being put down in front of them, although it kind of is. Um, they were inserted later and they are absolute perfection. I mean, they're beautiful. Whoever they got to do the food part of that was absolutely brilliant. It just absolutely jumps off the screen. Even the cheeseburger. It's just perfect. So, very good. I love that film. Okay. Hopefully, everybody has some cookies and a glass of water, and I'll talk about my number four as quickly and cohesively as I can. I chose this movie because it is absolutely one of my most favorite puzzle kind of movies, although I feel like if you never watch this movie and you just hear me talk about it, that's probably fine. Please do not subject yourself to this if it is too much. If you don't sort of want to expose yourself to the levels of trauma that I am about to describe. The movie is called Irreversible. And of course, that's a play on sort of the title is a play on the actual level of storytelling that is going on in the movie. What happens is each scene that we see from the beginning of the movie to the end is actually the preceding moment before whatever we see. So we don't know what actually happens at the very beginning before what we see, but what we do know is that what we see is actually the end of everything. And then we go back a step, and then back a step, and then back a step from there. And each one of these shots, if you will, is done in either a continuous shot or it's done with this kind of like composite camera situation where it looks like it is one continuous shot. It's filmmaking brilliance, but the story itself, the central part of the story is about a incredibly brutal and horrible rape. And so, I mean, that in and of itself is extremely difficult to watch. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot of um, over the top violence, and that over the top violence can also be just as difficult to stomach. And the realism that this film portrays, the levels to which realism becomes an aspect of this, as if we are voyeuristically watching everything that's transpiring, unable or unwilling to help in any way, sort of adds to this very uncomfortable layering effect. So no, you don't really want to be watching what you're watching. And in order to get to the next scene, which is going to tell you what happened just before what you just watched, you have to endure what you're watching now. And you don't know, is it going to be worse? Is it going to be better? What's going to happen? Um, it's a fascinating idea, both in puzzle making storytelling and in cinematography. This doesn't get done much better than it was with Irreversible. And you can see why people don't try. This really requires a set of skills which are very specific, and it needs a kind of direction that is so picky, so incredibly precise that there are no loopholes in between. And Irreversible pulls that off. Again, it is over the top. Um, I feel like I just have to give everybody the heads up warning that this is not a movie to watch with children. It's not a movie to watch. I feel like this is not a movie to watch alone. This is a movie that if you're gonna watch it, watch it with a little bit of a support system because it requires a lot of emotional deconstruction afterwards because you just feel incredibly awful. And that is the point. The point is of the whole movie is basically to make you understand that these awful things that happen, not it's not to get to the point of why they happen. It's to understand the cause and effect, and cause and effect by telling it backwards in a reverse order uh, gives you a very keen insight into sort of seeing things differently, changing up the perspective completely. So Irreversible as number 4 gets really high marks from me for being absolutely brilliant storytelling in a movies of puzzles.
Took me a minute to find it to put it on the to put it on your list, which everybody can.
Have you
Huh?
ever seen Irreversible?
I have not.
It's hard. It's very hard to watch. I actually watched this with a cinema group, a group of people that get together and talk about movies. And when this particular movie came up, man, people were really there was a lot of trepidation about embracing this particular movie, and I feel like we all got so much out of it because at the time, we were all talking about being scriptwriters and there were a bunch of people in the group who were also budding directors and stuff. And it was an amazing conversation that sort of happened afterwards. But the subject matter made everybody basically like want to take a shower and eat something wholesome like bread or something, like it was just so it's like you needed catharsis afterwards. And honestly, there's not a lot of movies out there. There's a lot of movies that do like really horrible things, but you get sort of desensitized to them, and it's like yeah, whatever. It's just, or you just feel like okay, I'm just going to turn it off. Irreversible has this sort of unique status where the cinema is so incredibly compelling that you don't want to turn it off, but you also just want to look away because it is just absolutely horrific. So yeah. So it still gets my number 4 choice. But yeah, it's be careful with this one.
Ringing endorsement.
Yeah, be careful.
And I was just about to say that if you want to find, our lists, you can go to Letterboxd and follow at 1021pod. That way you can, see what we're talking about. And from there, it'll tell you where you can find these movies to watch. I was just perusing the things we've talked about so far and came across the realization about halfway through I was adding my movies to your list and your movies to my list. And yeah, I had to fix that real quick. So by the time, unless you're listening live, because it's not live just yet, as far as Letterbox goes, but when you listen to it, it'll be fixed. So I don't know why I had to mention it because you never would have known. Why did I even bring it up?
Because it is sort of like a puzzle. You're just sort of like giving me little clues along the way. But by the time that I get there, it'll all already be put together, and you'll go, haha, see, no puzzle here.
Flipping another piece. Speaking of another piece, although that sounds really terrible. My number 4, my number 4 is a movie that kind of came out of nowhere for me. It coincidentally enough also has Anya Taylor-Joy. I'm talking about Last Night in Soho.
Hmm.
Have you seen?
I
Last
haven't
Night in
seen Last
Soho?
Night in Soho. Nope, I have not seen it.
Okay, then I won't do any spoilers. Long story short, a woman, I always want to say girl, a woman, um, trying to figure out what's a spoiler and what's not a spoiler. Okay, um, this woman's mother um, unalives herself while the girl's young. The woman's young. She's a girl. Um, you know what? Let me start over. Okay. There's this little girl, and her mother unalives herself. Fast forward to the little girl being grown up, and she maybe sees her ghost and somehow gets transported back to the 60s.
Ooh.
And she starts living this sort of double life. In the daytime, she's herself, and at night, when she goes to sleep, she is um, in the 60s living as a person. So, questions get asked. What's reality? Which life is the real one? What is going on? And unfortunately, if I answer any of these questions, it kind of leads into spoiler territory. But it is a supernatural sort of mystery. I'm not going to say it's entirely unpredictable, but I think Edgar Wright did a pretty darn good job putting this one together and telling an intriguing story that may be less about the mystery and more about the story. He creates these wonderful visuals, and the fact that it's two very completely different times, being able to show these it's one location taking place in completely different eras. So in the day you see the modern area, and when she switches to the other life, it's suddenly a swinging 60s vibe. As I want to, was it? Uh, I really wish I remembered things like where things are taking place, but it's British. I don't remember if it was in London or not. But the point is, Edgar Wright really brings both worlds to life and gives you bits and pieces of what could be, and then when it comes down to what is, it's still a surprise. You get a lot of bits and pieces that don't make sense until it does, and I think that's sort of the pinnacle of what a puzzle film should be. I'd like
Okay.
to be guessing until the end, personally. And this one will have you trying to figure it out, thinking you have enough. And for some people, they will absolutely get it. Um, but for some of us that are mm, less inclined to put very different pieces together in a way that seems obvious in the end, and you should still be eh, pleasantly, not a great word. You should still be surprised by the time the credits start rolling. So, Last Night in Soho is my number four.
Okay. Hmm. I haven't seen it, so I can't say anything about it. But all right. I sounds good. It does sound good. Okay. My number three movie. My number three movie is kind of old. It also had or has Kevin Spacey in it. It's called K-Pax, and K-Pax is so God, K-Pax is so interesting. Um, so I mean, I guess I would kind of classify this as a psychological thriller. Um, this person shows up in basically a mental ward, and there is a stay on, they bring him in. He claims to be an alien, and that obviously isn't normal. And so they hold on to him, and he does some sort of interesting things, but they're not necessarily like, magic tricks or anything. They're just kind of like, okay, what's going on here? And then we sort of discover some things possibly about his backstory, but is it actually his backstory, or is it the backstory of the person that this alien has assumed the identity of? And that's really hard to piece together. It's very difficult to, I guess, extract the truth of the matter in any event, in any way that you unravel this. It is incredibly difficult, just in terms of it being sad. It was sad, like, there is, I think, a point at which we all kind of understand that past trauma can absolutely change our entire outlook on life. And some people really want to escape the pain and the torment that they're in. And someone who is an alien who says, "Well, I'm going to be leaving here soon," when if they're in a mental ward, you can imagine that a lot of people would be asking, "Can you take me with you? Can you take me with you?" And it really is kind of the human cry for, "Can you relieve my pain? Can you ease my suffering? Can we escape?" There's so many rich, beautiful metaphors in here. The puzzle part of this is, do we actually know who he is? And the answer is no. No, we do not. Um, he says he's from a planet called K-Pax. He says that he, Dr. Powell, who is the psychiatrist, that's Jeff Bridges, and he kind of comes up with these sort of like, I don't understand what's happening, because it seems like the alien calls himself Prot, Prot, totally not capitalized, just Prot. He can see ultraviolet light, and he is completely unaffected at all by thorazine, which, if you don't know what thorazine is, it is a hell of a drug. It will absolutely put you out. Um, they use thorazine in some of the most psychotic people, when they're having psychotic episodes. So I mean, it's crazy how powerful it is. So anyway, the whole thing moves on in this sort of like parallel storytelling plot, where you get Prot telling stories to the people who are there at the psychiatric ward, but then you also get Powell, who's sort of trying to figure out his own way and everything. And the closer that he gets to Prot, the more he sort of like feels like, oh, maybe there's something else going on here. But maybe that's just the parallel for Powell's life, that, he has something to learn. In the end, Prot disappears, and we don't really know what happens to him, but we then kind of come back to Powell being sort of a new person with a new life, because he was so inspired by what happened. There's some really good parts to this movie which make me super happy, but I think um, the ultimate puzzle part of this is, there's no way to know what's happening, what happens, what is this just a metaphor for some kind of mental illness, or is this something more, and all the little clues along the way, or is this simply something that we just don't understand? this particular movie got incredibly sort of like wide ranging reviews from especially critics. They I don't think anybody really knew how to kind of understand it. I mean, I do think, and this has been mentioned before, that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is pretty close to the way that K-Pax operates. But what makes it, I think, really interesting, and the puzzle part of this that kind of gets unraveled is, despite the fact that it's very dialogue heavy and can be really difficult, I think, to like, it doesn't there's not a lot of action in this movie, so it can make it hard to sort of just sit and listen to people talk. But on the other hand, this is also kind of at the heart of human existence, and if you can imagine what it must be like, as for a person who's either experienced tons of trauma and just doesn't sort of, it needs to reacclimate into being human again in some ways. um this is truly, I think, one of the best ways of us experiencing that understanding. I really, really appreciate this movie for everything that it was trying to say. Even if it wasn't a perfect movie, it is definitely a well told movie. And it definitely gets my number three spot for movies that are puzzles.
Can I make one quick recommendation for those that want to watch K-Pax?
Yeah.
Do it sober.
Oh boy.
I know from experience that you
Yes, you got
don't
some
want to
truth you
watch
want to
it.
lay on us?
Yeah, I was not sober when I watched it. Um, and I'm not saying it took away from my enjoyment of the film, but it certainly took away from me understanding what was going on screen. And considering, as you just laid out for us, that it's a puzzle movie, uh, it certainly didn't help matters. So I'm just saying, yeah, watch it a little sober. That way, you can follow everything that's going on instead of like, oh, what's the dude saying? So yeah, that's my advice. All right.
Did you like this movie?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. This movie is actually based on a book, which after I saw the movie, I went and read, and there's a lot of differences. I mean, it follows the same basic principle, but the book really does kind of a good job of keeping you very it's very suspenseful. There's a lot that happens in the book. Inner monologue is kind of like the best of the best that you just don't get with a movie. And it's so interesting. It's and especially the character of Mark Powell, Doctor. Um he is such an amazing character, really. It's if you like the movie, I highly suggest that you read the book because it really is good.
Well, that seems like a ringing endorsement for reals. And I'll have to give that a check out. And I do need to watch the movie again. And since I don't partake in inebriation anymore, and this was 2001 after all, I was a young whippersnapper. And yeah, I'll be watching it again. Then I'll be able
Good.
to answer you for sure whether
All
or
right.
not I liked it. But a movie that I did like and is my number three is weird how things keep coming back to numbers for me. It's the number 23.
Oh, okay.
Good enough? It's
Okay.
in case you're joining us late, I'm kind of gauging Jen's reactions to the
I'm
movies
I'm
that I
trying to think what was 23. 23 was um 23 was it was an 80s film, right?
No,
Um, no?
no, it came out in 2007.
Okay, so it wasn't the story about the hacker?
No, it's directed by Joel Schumacher and stars Jim Carrey.
Oh, I don't think I know this one.
Really? Okay. Well, it's about Jim Carrey, his character Walter Sparrow, gets a book from his wife for his birthday called The Number 23, and it's a sort of it's a detective story about a guy named Fingerling, and he has this obsession with the number 23. And it's like one of those things you start noticing like once it's brought to your attention. And in the book, the detective is obsessed with uh, in his mind how everything comes back to the number 23. Everything's directly tied to that number. And as Walter's reading it, he also becomes obsessed with this idea that everything revolves around the number 23.
Oh, you know what? I did see this movie. I just remembered it. Okay.
That's not a great sign.
Why is that not a good sign? This was actually oh man, I had so many questions about this movie. Although this is definitely one of those movies where yes, it feels like a puzzle, but it also feels like they left it totally incomplete and then upended it at the very end of the movie and just scattered all the pieces on the floor again and said, "Ha, you don't know anything."
But it's still a puzzle.
Oh, it absolutely. I agree. I agree.
Didn't say it was a satisfying puzzle. I just said it's a puzzle.
I'm just saying in case anybody is like, well, what is the answer about all these number 23s? You won't know. You literally won't know.
Yeah, it's not coming. That's the long and short of it. But if you're into seeing Jim Carrey put in a performance where he slowly loses his mind, and instead of just
Yeah.
starting off the movie that way, um,
Yeah.
then by all means, give it a check out. Virginia Madsen's also in this, and it really is one of those Jim Carrey performances where he is sort of all over the the acting sphere,
Yeah.
from humble, mild mannered, just guy, all the way to manic, obsessive, trying to figure out what reality is, and of course everything in between. So to see Jim Carrey put on a performance like this in I think at the time in an incredibly unexpected way, I enjoyed it. Now, yeah, you just said, is the story the best? It has its moments of pretty awesomeness, but it won't leave you ultimately satisfied if you're looking for a tight conclusion. I lean towards this being uh, just more of a you know how they have those puzzles that are just like all white.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that, where you put in the work, you watched it, and you go, I did it. But at the end of the day, it's still a blank. It's just a white thing. And the only thing you can walk away with is this accomplishment that, yeah, I watched this. And either you enjoyed the fact that it was a good journey, or you dwell on the fact that the destination was a bit of a letdown. But
So
that's more, it says more about how you enjoy movies, I think, than anything.
I think one of my biggest criticisms continually of Jim Carrey is that he's an over actor. And I mean that's a criticism for me not because that's a shortcoming of him, but because the movie becomes about Jim Carrey instead of, hey, this is a movie with Jim Carrey in it, and here's the movie. And so, then we like the movie. Um, Sometimes Jim Carrey's presence can just be so,
Over the
it's
top.
yeah, over the top, but more than over the top, it's his force of personality. It's not it's not a grandiosity like, oh, you have gravitas in the role, because that's different. Um, it's something else. It's a power. It's like a force that he has around him that just requires him to go, hell bent on doing whatever it is that he's doing at full throttle speed. Now, in this movie, though, it really works, and it there's something about putting him in a very serious role which tones him down a lot, but also that level of intensity is still right at the surface. I mean, it's just still white hot. And I think that this movie is a phenomenal movie, that, from a puzzle standpoint, again, because we just don't understand at all. We're not meant to understand as the audience what the significance of 23 is. But what we know is that through the storytelling, we know that it's slowly driving him absolutely insane. And the other thing, which I think is maybe worth calling out for this movie, is it's really difficult. I just mentioned Dead Ringers, where, you've got an actress, Rachel Weisz, who's playing two individual roles. In this movie, Jim Carrey plays two roles as well. And it's really amazing. Like, it really comes off as being very authentic. So, yeah, I give this movie a lot of credit too. I'm surprised I didn't recognize it. I think I don't know why I didn't recognize it, other than just I it was just out of my brain for a second. It was probably pushed aside by some trivial fact like, what am I going to have for dinner tonight or something. There's only so much room in my brain. Yeah. So, I'm glad I was able to retrieve that from the cloud. That's good.
Yeah, just amazing to me that your gen, your processors are super fast.
I definitely, the older that I get, the more storage space I need. So think I'm gonna have to, shell out for the extra $2 a month and get some more storage space. Because, yeah, I can definitely feel that it's getting a little bit crowded up there. But I'll tell you one thing. I do remember my next movie. I remember it like I saw it yesterday, because I loved this movie. I don't care what anybody else says about this movie. You can argue with me until you are blue in the face, and I will meet you toe to toe.
Let's do it.
All right. Number two for me is this movie with Leonardo DiCaprio called Shutter Island. Um, okay, from the perspective of a puzzle telling story, I'm going to go through that first, and then I'm going to say why I think people didn't like this movie, and frankly, why I think they're wrong. Um, so we discover basically at the outset that Leonardo DiCaprio is a detective, and he is inside of an insane asylum, really, a mental hospital. And it's clearly a mental hospital that is meant to be a prison. And there's a lot of people in there, and there has been some things that have happened, some crimes that have happened inside of the let's just call it penitentiary. And he needs to put together all of these things. The who done it of the who done its is always difficult to kind of piece together, but we start getting little indications that there might be something here, much like a good Transformers movie, which is more than meets the eye. And it's interesting. There's no robots in disguise, however, but there are a number of characters which I think eventually we understand are kind of in disguise. There are all of these subtle clues, and if you go back and you watch this movie after you understand what's really happening, if you go back and watch it again, you can see how it unfolds. You can see where all of the breaks are that really, are people basically trying to tell him, uh, yeah, maybe you're not actually who you think you are. And that leads to some really interesting sort of revelations down the road. This from a from a puzzle telling story standpoint, this movie kind of does it all. Like, it adds mystique, it reveals everything, and then at the end of the movie it resets it. And you gotta love a movie that has the ability to see itself for what it is and still be able to bear the truth at the end, knowing that that's not what either the character or the audience was expecting. Um, there are so many good levels of this movie. There are so many interesting aspects of it that have unique and wonderful both metaphors and overarching allegories. It's just a beautifully done movie. Now, uh Leonardo DiCaprio at the time that he did this movie, I feel like was kind of everywhere. And people were maybe a little bit sick of him. I don't know, not sick of him, but like, oh, another Leonardo DiCaprio movie. Honestly, this movie was amazing. And I also think that part of the reason people didn't like this movie is because they couldn't figure it out. They As they were watching it, at the end, you do understand what's happening. I mean, we get the moment of clarity. We all understand what's been happening. And I think audiences felt sort of like, "Aw, how come I didn't see that?" And that is usually what makes people say, "Oh, this movie was so contrived," or, "Oh, why did they have to do it this way? This was silly to be." No, it was not silly. You just didn't see it, and there's no sense in making anybody else feel bad about liking something that you just didn't get the first time. It's fine. We can all admit that we don't all know everything. And especially when it comes to movies and these kinds of puzzle sort of stories where, yeah, you don't get it, or you have to watch it twice, or somebody has to tell you, or you got to go watch a YouTube video about it. There is nothing wrong with that. It is totally fine. It does not take away anything from your experience or your enjoyment of something simply because it needs to be explained. I feel like that's actually an extra added component of storytelling and movie making. Sometimes, if you don't know something, somebody else will have sort of puzzled it out, and they can clue you in about what you may have missed. That's like getting added features at the end of a movie. It's like being given a little gift at the end of the movie. Oh, I watched this movie and there's this. That is really cool. And that's what I feel like Shutter Island did. It gave us a ton of, after the movie, let's really deconstruct what happened here. And oh, all these things were right on the table in front of us, and we just didn't see it. I really loved Shutter Island. I really feel like it was an amazingly well thought out movie, and it gets my number two spot. So there you go, number two.
I haven't seen it. I thought, honestly, I thought the trailers did a bit of a disservice to it because it seemed, I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak from an authoritative position, but it just seemed like it was at the sort of the front end of this era where trailers give away so much information that you really don't go in as blind as you should for a story like this. That was just the feeling that I got, and it kind of took away um, an interest in seeing the film, and I still haven't gotten around to it.
Wow. That this one is another one of those, like, this is on my list of, top movies that everybody should at least see once. It fits sort of differently in my list of of movies to kind of see, because it fills a niche which is really different from a lot of movies. It's a lot of it is very noir, and because it's noir, it it relies heavily on telling story through lighting, shadows, um,
Hmm.
color tones, gradients, and because of that, you get a totally different feel for what's happening. And again, I can't speak highly enough about the inceptional idea. Sorry, Leonardo, I didn't mean this to be a pun, because I know you were in Inception too. But the inceptional idea of this particular piece of storytelling is so good, and it was just a brilliant sort of I just can't even describe it other than just to say, yeah, this was really good. I loved it so much.
Well, you know what I love?
Tell me your number two and how much you love it.
It's literally one of my favorite movies of all time.
Ooh, nice. Always good when those things come together in our lists.
It is. In fact, I I might have an issue here because I I just have this inkling that it might have been more my want of putting the movie on the list uh, that outweighed the actual puzzle uh, aspect of making the list. I mean, it all felt justified in my mind when I did it, but as we've been going on and I see what it is, I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's a case to be made for sure, and I'm gonna make that case. But I I think it's gonna be one where you saying, okay, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this. So let's see if that pans out. My number two is also Richard Kelly, Donnie Darko.
No, I definitely think that that works. I think Donnie Darko is actually a really good layered storytelling kind of movie.
Good, 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 good. Because I was definitely worried that because there are two main cuts of it, uh, the original cut that had more of the puzzle aspect, right? The secondary cut that was released, and I think it's the one that's more widely available. It it's more handholdy and sort of literally tells you what's going on in the pages of the book as it you know inserts them throughout the film. But either way you look at it, Donnie Darko is a mystery unto itself. It's certainly a puzzle that needs to be put together to understand. Uh, Once you do, you'll understand why it's important to be committed to sparkle motion. That's for sure. And it's also, in case for some reason you haven't heard of it, uh, then if you haven't, hey, you're here listening to a podcast about movies. Welcome to cinema. So when this script sort of made the rounds, it caught the eye of both Patrick Swayze and Drew Barrymore, who were just like, "Give me a part," and they both have minor roles in this. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal and Maggie Gyllenhaal, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't know who she was then, but I do know now. It's filled with people you now know because of this movie. What is Donnie Darko? Well, it's about a troubled teen that is having um, mental stability issues. I think that's a delicate way to put it.
Yeah.
And by mental stability issues, I mean he's seeing, you know, a messed up looking rabbit following him around, telling him what to do. It's all a part of the mystery, the puzzle, as it were. Who is this? Who is Frank the Rabbit? Why is he telling Donnie to do these seemingly terrible things that have really unintended question mark consequences? Because when Donnie's in this kind of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not susceptive. He's influenced state, and begins to do the
Vulnerable.
biddings. Vulnerable. That's perfect. He he does what the rabbit tells him to do to these. At first everyone's like, "What? This is crazy. This is awful," and then suddenly, you know, it all leads to uh, more information coming out that surprises everyone that that these acts could lead to something um, good is not the operative word here, but uh, that could lead to justice in some way. And like any movie about a teenage boy, naturally there's going to be a teenage girl that's going to be there to sort of act as a love interest. So he's really towing this line of, you know, the the literal voices in his head and the person that kind of encourages him to be just himself. It gets to be a really uh, interesting combination of influences on Donnie, and it culminates into to tragedy on multiple levels, and it's really Donnie Darko may be a movie that's what 22 years old now, right? But I will always, always talk about this movie with the idea in the back of my mind. If you haven't seen it, you have to go in as fresh as possible. I feel like I've said too much as it is, but it is a powerful piece, sort of part coming of age, part sci-fi thriller, part God knows what, and it is absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time.
I,
And that's why it's
I
my
think
number two.
Donnie Darko. I think Donnie Darko sort of it runs headlong into the territory of is this your alter ego, or is this something that is definable? Is this something that you like? I've seen a lot of really good horror movies about um, different kinds of things that become manifest, shame that becomes manifest, um, trauma that becomes manifest, ideas that sort of like make up the existence of who we are as people, and then they become real tangible things. And I think Donnie Darko tries very successfully to express some of that in a way that is, like I was saying before at the beginning of the show, well obfuscated, so that you really have to kind of not guess, but pay attention to get to where you need to go. And this particular kind of movie, a lot of movies like the ones that I was talking about, it's totally fine for me to put together the edges of the puzzle with you and give you sort of the outline that, yeah, okay, then when you watch the movie, all the pieces will fall together and you'll go, oh, yeah, great. I had the outline already. I knew what was kind of going on. There are some movies which I do feel like, yeah, you just kind of have to go in a little bit more. Yeah, okay, let's just see what happens. And I think that this is one of those. It's just one of those movies that is, it's better not to have the edges put together for you here, because part of the fun of this movie is realizing where the boundaries really are. So, yeah. I think that it was a good choice. That was a really good choice.
And whether or not boundaries actually exist.
And yeah, and even whether boundaries exist. Yeah, it's very existential. This movie has a very existential feel to it. Um, yeah, yeah, very good. Good choice.
Thank you.
Um, okay, my number one movie is the movie, which I'm sure everybody will guess, as my favorite puzzle movie, Hellraiser. Hellraiser has always been my favorite puzzle movie, both literal and figurative. Hellraiser significantly actually has a puzzle in it, the puzzle box, but the entire movie is actually a puzzle. Um, I'm not going to speak about the entire franchise of Hellraiser. I'm just going to say that the original Hellraiser is a movie that I still watch to this day and don't get tired of. Much like Aliens for me, this movie just has a place. It scratches an itch for me, which is just amazing. It the premise of Hellraiser is there is a puzzle box and it basically opens a portal, and that portal invites, they call themselves, or the people call them, demons, but they're not really demons. The entities themselves call themselves interdimensional travelers. And so I think, this is one of the cool things about Hellraiser, is that it kind of opens up this dialogue of, well, what are we actually considering to be demons, and is this really hell? No. Yes, maybe. I don't know. Um, but the idea that you can come back from the dead because of a puzzle box is sort of crazy. The idea that there are these alternate dimensional subsystems of existence is also a crazy idea. And the intersectionality of all of this is the puzzle box. So while there may be a straightforward afterlife of heaven and hell, Hellraiser introduces the idea of another intersectional line, which is you're on the plane of interdimensional travel. It's fascinating to me because it raises so many questions, and the movie itself is not, to me, this movie doesn't exist like a regular movie. It's, I mean, obviously, it has a beginning, middle, and end. It's not as obfuscated as some of my movies. It's not like, it doesn't have the platform levels of what WTF is going on. Um, but it does, I think, give the viewer a chance to think about puzzles as an entire mechanism. The puzzle box is more than just the MacGuffin here. The puzzle box is the actual plot line. And I kind of love that because that's not usual. We don't have that in most of our story. Mostly, the object, the whatever, the MacGuffin is sort of ancillary, well, not ancillary, but it's important to the story, but it's not the story. In Hellraiser, the puzzle box is the story. Nothing can happen without the puzzle box. And I just absolutely love that idea. It's they've tried this over and over and over again, and the second one was okay. But they never seem to kind of recapture the real magic of the first one. And I think it's because the simplicity of telling that story gets really convoluted really fast. Now, the newest Hellraiser, the one that just came out a couple of years ago, that I have to say is actually, I think, a really excellent homage to the old Hellraiser. And it really brought back a lot of the stuff that made the original Hellraiser as good as it was. The puzzle box, there's like this shard. It looks like a shard. It's actually the puzzle box. And it has taken on a brand new shape, a shape that we haven't seen before. And now we're in like a different layer of the Hellraiser storytelling, where the mythology has become all about the vices of man, the seven deadly sins. And that's the stuff that really gets it back to its roots. So I feel like this is just an excellent story. I absolutely adore it. Not every Hellraiser is great, but every Hellraiser always involves the puzzle box. So, Hellraiser gets my number one pick for movies of puzzles, both literal and figuratively in this particular instance.
Somehow I feel like I should have known this was coming.
Yeah, I kind of figured. I mean, when I talked to everybody else about, hey, we're doing movies about puzzles, everybody was like, I know what your favorite's going to be. And yep, they were right.
It's like,
So,
oh, you just wanted to talk about Hellraiser.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Well, now that we know the origin of this topic, uh, by the way, and on your advice, I finally got around to watching Hellraiser.
Oh,
And I believe I mentioned here on the show before, it is a movie where I looked at the year that it was made and I saw the effects on screen and I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is too good. This definitely does not come from that era. What is going on? Because those effects are amazing.
they are right. I mean, the and most of those, although it's weird, but most everything in Hellraiser is a practical effect. There is very little real like CGI in it. It's done with almost Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation and then very practical effects. And it shows. It shows in the way that the thing that John Carpenter's The Thing, which relies almost entirely on practical effects, has the same kind of feel where you feel like it is really a part of the scene because it is a part of the scene. And I feel like that's what also makes Hellraiser so good. Just independently as a movie, you never feel like you're just watching computer generated graphics. You are really kind of immersed in what's going on. So, yeah. And
Great choice.
Pinhead spawned an entire mythology all by themselves. They are just absolutely the coolest of characters. I really love it. So, yeah. Sweet.
Well, I
So,
guess
what's your number one?
it's time for my number one.
It is time.
And not only do I really like this movie, but the the one sheet, the movie poster, literally has a puzzle on the front. So
Ooh.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that this falls under that category of puzzle films. I'm talking about a movie made in 19 well not made 19, a movie 1997 directed by David Fincher, The Game.
Oh, yeah, good choice.
It stars Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. Long story short, Michael Douglas plays a rich guy. Sean Penn plays his brother, sort of a family screw up, and they both come from a wealthy family. Michael Douglas followed in the family business and continued that wealth rolling. Sean Penn's character, again, more not that. So for his birthday, Sean Penn buys his brother um, an invitation to partake in a game. Well, the thing is, he gets rejected. At first he's like, I don't want to play your stupid game. And then he goes down there anyway, maybe out of curiosity, and he gets straight up rejected. He's like, no, this isn't for you, Mr. Van Orden. This is definitely not something for you. Until it starts. Now, the questions, the main question that you're asking as the movie plays out is, what is the game? And yes, that is the question. What is it? Is it you know what? It's hard to even follow up those questions because that's the singular focus of how you look at this as Michael Douglas's character, his life is being picked completely clean, picked to the bone. He's losing everything, and he can't. He doesn't understand what's going on, and it only makes sense that his brother, the screw up, would get him involved in something so awful and life destroying. I'm of course not gonna talk about the ending, but as the movie plays out, Michael Douglas is forced to confront not only the sins of their father, but also reflect on how their father has influenced him and the life that he has versus the life that he could have had, and where he could be more affable, more likable, instead went the route of serious businessman. He could have been more like his brother. He didn't have to, go so hard in the family business, but losing everything it has a way of making you wonder, how did you get to this point? So it's the game. The ultimate winner is, well, it's hard to say, but it's a great ride.
I'll give you a hint. It's all about capitalism.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Really quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just, yeah.
No, I just thought there was, you had a bit more to throw in there.
I, I mean, I like this movie, and I like this movie a lot. It's a good movie, but I'm not sure if it fits in with all the other movies because I don't. Although I guess it kind of does a little bit. I mean, there are so many things that he doesn't know, and so by extension, as the audience, we don't know either. But I don't know. There's something about this movie that never quite matches for me that feeling of I don't know. I think because at the end it feels too Deus ex machina. Like it feels too much like they reached in and just said, "Ta-da! Here you go.
Well, that's
Everything is."
literally what they did.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I'm saying like I don't know. Like it did like okay, let's go back to the menu, right? In the menu, um yeah, it didn't that didn't feel to me. That felt to me like, "Oh, oh wow. Yeah, that happened. Oh." But in the game it felt like, "Oh, okay. Well, that happened." And like it didn't give me the same sort of like if you've been putting puzzle, remember how you were talking about a puzzle, putting together a puzzle and then it's just like all white. Yeah, it's like you put it all together and like, okay, well then what's the satisfaction at the end? Is it pretty? Is there something cool to look at? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment? And I feel like, I mean, the game was a good movie, don't get me wrong, but I but as a puzzle movie it kind of just feels like, wow, you guys just like pulled an ending out of your, I don't know, hairline. And yeah, okay. Well, this is just what is happening now. And I don't know, I don't know. I guess I just didn't like the ending.
Again, one of those situations where The ride is, when before you have all of the answers, where you're wondering, wait, who's telling the truth here? But then, like you said, you know, the movie comes at you and says, "It's us. We
Uh,
are."
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
With like literally, a bottle of champagne in hand, going, "This is the big reveal. Let's celebrate." But I credit it for the journey, more than the destination, and I'll be upfront about it. But you know what? It doesn't matter if this one's like minorly spoiled. One of my favorite lines is, "Huh, I'm glad you jumped. If you didn't, I was gonna have to throw you off."
yeah, right, right.
And which, considering the context of that, grainy footage that they were showing, throughout the movie, and you know the kind of full circle moment of him, you know reaching that decision that haunted his entire life. uh, Not even a decision he made, but a decision of someone else that, just bore on his soul since it was made. And then he turns around and makes the same choice. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter to me how you look at it. The 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 people running the game, those are some messed up individuals.
Yeah, definitely.
And another, um, as far as puzzle pieces go, I will say, the commercial I thought was well done.
Yeah. Just as like a quick sort of shout out to honorable mention, I feel like we would be remiss in a game about puzzles not to mention the movie Seven. Um, Mostly because Seven also feels like one of those movies that is like it is so twisty turny, but I mean it's not worthy of this particular list because it doesn't puzzle the way that every all the other movies on this list puzzle. It is a puzzle, but it is not a puzzle that we don't understand necessarily. Because everything feels a little bit more transparent, and you kind of get it what it is on surface value. Um, but I love the idea of what Seven was trying to do, which was put together a movie based on the puzzles of a criminal in a really similar way to the way that Jigsaw does it in Saw, so that so that the stakes are always just crazy high, higher than the next level. Everything just sort of builds upon itself. So I mean, I know there's a ton of movies that we are missing off of this list, but yeah, I this genre is a great genre. It's a great methodology of telling a story. So
Well, that's my number one. The Game, David Fincher. We talk about David Fincher movies a lot.
we do, yeah. His movies are absolutely incredible.
Well, would you like to recap your list, which can be found at letterbox.com? Follow 1021 Pod. And then I'll do mine and offer up our homework.
All right. Number 10 for me was Cube. Number 9, Premonition. Number 8, The Platform. Number 7, The Fountain. Number 6, Murder on the Orient Express. Number 5, 12 Monkeys. Number 4, Irreversible. Caveat, watch with friends. Number 3, K-Pax. Number 2, Shutter Island. And number 1, Hellraiser.
All right. That's quite the impressive list you got there, Jen.
Why, thank you.
Now, why don't we pull out my list of hodgepodge nonsense? I'm just kidding, of course. You said it wasn't terrible, so I'm going to
It
call
was
that a
not.
win.
This was actually a really good list for somebody who didn't think that they got it right. It actually is really good.
Seems like I say that every 2 weeks.
It does.
Let's see, whose list is it this week? Well, Josh is talking about maybe he didn't understand the homework, so it's probably a Jen week. Well, my number 10 was Primer. My number 9, Southland Tales. Number 8, The Prestige. Number 7, The Life of David Gale. Number 6, Mission Impossible. Number 5, The Menu. Number 4, Last Night in Soho. Number 3, The Number 23. It's so weird to say it like that. Number 3 is The Number 23. Number 2 is Donnie Darko. And number 1 is The Game. You're probably wondering, Josh, what is our homework?
Yes, what is our homework? What are we going to do for next week? Hope
Well-
it's something less cryptic.
You wish. No, it's just as cryptic as always.
Oh boy.
Okay, maybe not. It's definitely one that is going to be kind of open to some interpretation.
Oh.
You know what? Scratch that. I'm going to take out that caveat, change a couple words in my delivery, and now it's going to read like this. Okay. Next week, it is our 10 favorite actors turned directors. And we're talking about the films they direct.
Oh boy. So it's basically a list of the most pretentious of pretentious people. Love this. Okay.
So if there are a lot of actors that have said, you know what, I want to try my hand at directing, even though they're a well-known actor. They're like,
Yeah,
I'm going to be a director now.
I'm just kidding about them being pretentious. Some of them really are pretentious, and some of them are actually so talented that acting could not contain all of their skills. So,
And
looking
some
at
of
you,
them get
Ron
snubbed at the
Howard.
Oscars.
Seriously. Who would have ever imagined that little Opie would grow up to give us the most amazing films ever?
And then quietly, those films just didn't live up to the expectations they used to.
Oh, I disagree. I love Ron Howard films. Are you kidding me?
Are you saying his current films are as good as his previous films?
Like what? Like what particular film are you talking about?
Let me pull up old Ronnie's resume here. He's certainly come a long way from whistling, on the way to the fishing hole, hasn't he?
Oh yeah. I mean, okay, let's get rid of Hillbilly Elegy, because that is, I feel like that just let's just forget that he ever did that.
That was my biggest bullet.
Yeah, okay. Let's just throw that out, okay? Because that just, one of these things is not like the other.
Let's see, he has 43 directing credits.
Damn.
Let's see. He did Solo? I didn't even realize he did Solo.
He did do Solo. And I wouldn't compare...
I did not know that.
I wouldn't compare Solo to, like, A Beautiful Mind, but it's still good.
Let's see. There's those Robert Langdon movies. From the Dan Brown novels.
Oh, you mean Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, but they're beloved. People love those. I mean, the only thing that I think that he did, which I personally just like don't particularly love, is I really didn't like the movie that was called Rush. The Formula One drivers. Yeah. I didn't like that movie. But it appealed to him, and clearly he loved the subject matter. I didn't like it. Because it just wasn't my kind of movie. But I mean, then if I go backwards, or I mean forwards, and I go to In the Heart of the Sea,
I
damn,
haven't
that
seen
was,
that.
oh my god, that was so good. I have no idea why more people didn't jump on that. It
I
was
don't think
so
I've heard
amazing.
of that.
Oh, it was so good. In the Heart of the Sea had um uh what's his name? Chris Hemsworth, that my guy, the guy I
Hmm.
love. And he, oh my god, I mean, like, he transforms his entire being for this movie. It's it's a Moby Dick story, but it is absolutely the kind of story that just sort of upends everything that you think you know about Moby Dick and turns it into, pardon the pun, but a whale of a tale. It is so good. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Maybe I've been mostly thinking about those um, Da Vinci Code
The Da
films.
Vinci movies. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
Angels and Demons, The Dilemma, no, not The Dilemma. I'm sorry. Inferno, and what was the other one? And The Da
The
Vinci
Da
Code.
Vinci Code.
Yeah, The Da Vinci Code. But I mean, people love those movies. People like really, I just freaking adore them. So just we don't, but yeah, other
So my
people do.
apologies to Ron Howard. I didn't mean to say that your skill has diminished. I just haven't really
And
seen
also,
much recently to.
and and also, can I just say that that the movie Willow was directed by Ron Howard, and that is absolutely on my list of top 50 movies. I I'll never get tired of watching Willow.
Well, I think we know what one of them's going to make on your list.
You think?
Now the question is where.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if Ron Howard makes a debut. There are some very interesting contenders for this particular genre, and there's also, I feel like a lot of actors who turn directors either really nail it, like really just nail it, or it's an unqualified disaster. So, you know, yeah, got some interesting leeway in there.
And I will remind everybody that the criteria for this is one slot, one film per director. So it's say for instance
So I can't
if
use Backdraft and Willow.
right, right.
Aw, man, that's rude.
Can't just go. These are 10 reasons why I love Ron Howard.
Rude. So rude. Okay. All right, all right. I'll play by the rules.
You know who doesn't play by the rules?
Everybody else.
No, you, Jen. You don't play by the rules. When
Well,
you create
mostly.
recipes, you don't just look at ingredients. You look at movies and then you put them on the internet, and that's what I want to hear about right now.
Well, if you are looking for a movie and some cute snack or awesome idea for a meal to go with it, hey, join me over at moviesandmeals.com. I have to say that last night we made this really awesome chicken pot pie because we watched the movie Chicken Run. And in Chicken Run, they're actually making chicken pot pies out of the chickens. It was so much fun. We really had a good time with it. Sometimes we get macabre, sometimes we get really creative and inventive. Join us, have a great time over there. And also, hopefully and eventually soon, podcast number 2 should be on its way soon, which is the podcast of storytellers, where we talk about everything story and really discuss and deep dive a lot of the things that we talk about on 10 to 1 that make films great, but we go into a little bit more detail. So hopefully that will be beginning soon. There we go.
No, continuing soon.
Continuing soon. Yes, thank you. It's hiatus is hard.
Well, life happens.
Health, stuff. Yeah, living is a perilous event, but yeah, we'll get through it. We'll get through it.
And if you're wondering about little old me, you can go to wadcomedia.com where you can get all the pertinent links and information to other places on the internet to find out what other shows Wadco Media produces. You can find my Twitter, I guess that's a thing. Honestly, the only time I ever, quote unquote tweet anything is when a new episode gets put up on Sunday, because here's how it works. You're listening live. If you're listening now, you're listening live on a Thursday night. It's a special night. Usually we're on Wednesday nights, but this week, Thursday night. And if you're downloading this, that's because I uploaded it to the interwebs on Sunday, so all of your favorite podcatchers can have it available for you to download, ready for the week as you make your regular commutes. You know, just so you don't run through them so fast. But you can find those links, all of that important information over at wadcomedia.com. But if you're super interested in hearing more about writers, actors, and directors, well, tomorrow night, the Wadcast episode number 129, I want to say, is coming at you live at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Just head on over to the Wadco Media Facebook page or the Wadcast Facebook page. Make sure you give all of those and the 1021 Facebook page a like so you know exactly when we go live. Tomorrow night, we're having a special guest. It's not a writer. It's not an actor. It's not a director. But it's somebody that needs to be there to make a film work. We're going to be talking with none other than, come on, graphic, come up. Graphic. Why isn't the graphic showing? Son of a biscuit. Oh, okay. I guess my window wasn't big enough for me. Anyway, tomorrow night on the Wadcast, Whitney Ann Adams, costume designer for films such as We Have a Ghost, Happy Death Day to You, and Freaky. After all, without costume designers, what would they wear? Exactly. So we're going to be talking to Whitney about what she does, how she does what she does, where and why she does what she does, and get a little bit of background on her. So if you have any burning questions for a film costume designer, by all means, make sure you're here live tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. That's Friday. It's a Friday. And if you've downloaded this episode, sorry. Maybe you should have already liked the Facebook pages, and you wouldn't be hearing about this 2 days later. So that's what's coming up.
Don't shame your audience. Don't shame them. It's okay. You'll get it next time. It's all good.
Yeah, just go get those likes, and we can get you this information in a more timely fashion. Just throw it. Not shaming. I'm just throwing it out there. So that's what's up.
Nice.
And we have our homework for next week. Actors turn directors. Needless to say, actresses turn director also included. I don't want anybody reaching out to me saying, "Listen here, you misogynistic jerk."
I already have a Penny Marshall film in mind, so yeah.
I have a feeling we might have some crossover as far as directors, but maybe not films.
I would say that could be.
And strangely enough, no crossover tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was pretty broad.
Yeah.
So, but this was a good list. I had a good time tonight.
We always have a good time, Jen.
Indeed.
That's because you bring the intelligence and I bring the chaos.
I don't know whether that's a compliment or, yeah, okay.
One of us should probably feel good, and the other should feel bad. Which one's which is up in the air.
I'll take it however I can get it and just say awesome. All right.
Well, then I guess there's only one thing left to do, isn't there?
There is.
Say goodnight, Jen.
Good night.